rise and the tether starting to stretch out. Let me, it might be anchored on that starboard side of the ship.
Say again?
It might be anchored over the top of the starboard side of the ship and left over there.
That curvature of the
one of the guns shield patterns.
yeah, that's original. That's part of the design.
I'm gonna send Chris a note really fast.
Need a pen?
Oh no, my phone.
Sorry, calculator or something.
Phone. I'm gonna talk to Chris really fast. Was TJ in here too, maybe? Or
TJ was, I can text him.
okay, either one of them.
So we're holding here as we try to determine where this rope might be. No, caution is obviously the best path.
We got, we're going to try to get Chris or TJ up here and help us determine where it's laying again.
Good. See if he comes on up.
All right, give him a few minutes.
So it's a line of questions here. Are there any ships from that battle, if we mean the Battle of Savo Island, in that area that are still missing?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what we'll be doing here is trying to get that more complete survey, mapping survey, and see if we can find targets. It's difficult because the water's deep, but if we find targets that look like they're vessels, we can then send the ROV down and try to identify them. So that's one aspect. What is a degaussing cable? The degaussing cable is a cable put around the ship that tries to lower its magnetic signature. I guess for many reasons, ships don't want to have a strong magnetic signature. One, the compasses need to work correctly. At some point, there were mines that used magnetic detection, so it's an effort to cut down the magnetic signature of a very large metal object. And let's see. Yeah, I don't know what the entire complement of the vessel was. The question is how many survivors were there of the Quincy? And we see that there were 370 sailors died, 167 were wounded. So
Can you scroll back up to the her complement should be listed in the stats.
Yeah, this.
All the way back to the top.
There we go.
Since we're here, I'm going to go ahead and do the logs, if you're fine with that.
We'll start scrolling down.
Yeah.
Not a bad view of that gun either. Not a bad view of the cannon.
Yeah, if you want to set that up in the cinema cam view, I've taken many an image of it, but
The
the
complement
more the
was
merrier.
103 officers, 763
You're limited
enlisted.
on your cinema camera
So
usage there.
800 and
869.
yeah. So
And of
they
course,
lost.
that number would grow on the surviving ships as new equipment was added. But yeah, I think Quincy's losses were the heaviest of the three.
Complement 866 officers, and there were 496 survivors. Thank you, Seth. So what's happening now is we're bringing in the pilots who first encountered the line that the vehicle snagged on originally, because they have the situational awareness of understanding where it went. And so that's being transferred over to this watch's pilot now.
We have a question here about this. Can someone speak to the rescue or injured? I imagine any rescue would be happening under incredibly horrific conditions. Yeah, very correct on that. For a much better account than I can give you, I would suggest finding a copy of Bob Ballard's book on the lost ships of Guadalcanal. Excuse me. He recounts some of the survivors' tales on the care of the wounded and the evacuation of the ships and all that when they were abandoned. And there's some just incredibly moving stories, heroic in nature. One that I found kind of particularly interesting. I never thought about it until it made sense, but apparently when someone was reported that he had been given a shot of morphine and for the pain that he was suffering, and the corpsman apparently then clipped the ampule to the guy, so that whoever came after him would see that somebody had administered already a morphine shot to him, so they wouldn't, give him another one and potentially cause an overdose. So it speaks well to the immense training that our sailors undergo before being assigned to a warship, and the way they acted under these conditions is a testament to that training.
It's a touching note here. Somebody wrote in that their great-grand-uncle, Lieutenant Commander Edmund Billings, was on the Quincy's bridge when it was hit. His last words were allegedly, "Everything will be all right. The ship will go down fighting, and certainly she did. So. So the question is, how long would it take for the ships to hit the bottom? And that's a very difficult question to answer. I think it really depends on the state of the damage.
My archaeologists back in the office have kind of pondered that question as well, and they are partnering with some folks up at the Naval Model Basin up at Carter Rock to kind of create a model to see if they can kind of estimate what happens to a ship during the whole sinking evolution. Because some of them, of course, revert, if they capsize, they revert back to the upright position. Some break apart, some don't. So we're trying to looking at some of the data from some of these past dives from various sites to see if we can figure some of the commonalities out of it.
So one of our shore-based scientists asked for that name again, who was on the lieutenant commander on the Quincy, and the name was, let me go back here, Lieutenant Commander Edmund Billings, B-I-L-L-I-N-G-S. Oh, really? Oh, I'll live and learn.
To the folks listening in from Battleship Cove in Fall River, Massachusetts, a shout out to the folks in Quincy as well. Thank you for tuning in and watching this. There he is.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's great having folks ashore watching these, participating.
So we have a group of shore-based experts who have been just phenomenal in providing information. And for the person who wrote in about their great uncle, they've just posted a picture of him, of Edmund Billings, and the comment that Newcomb's book on Salvo has Billings' name incorrect.
Thank you, man.
All right,
Okay.
roger that.
Okay, team. So we have a plan to approach this and get as much as we think we can without being reckless.
Okay, well, let's forge on. That sounds wonderful.
Okay, so
Frank, a question for you. What Japanese vessel was given credit for sinking
No pun intended on that.
of the Quincy?
There were several that caught her in kind of a crossfire.
Yes.
Cruiser Alba, I think Tenru and Furitaka. Let me double check that.
Hey, ready?
Yeah, she was caught in a crossfire between Aba, Furataka, and Tenryu.
And again, for our descendant of Billings, one of our outside experts, Randy Stone, says if he's not mistaken, Billings was a reserve officer involved in geology and mining. And he was the man who called for battle stations on the Quincy as standing officer of the deck. A good man.
Yeah, he was just here. Yeah. So this is the line here. So now we have a good idea of how it lays.
Now, if we just get that gun to shoot that line off,
That'd be great.
That's kind of a powerful image.
It is.
Right there.
You capture that? Good, good. Noel is on top of it always.
I've got a lot of cameras now. And no camera operator, so
Yeah, there you
we're
go.
doing our best.
But you have two hands, so it's
I got
okay.
excellent point, Larry. I need one more.
Noel, any chance of maybe Bill coming up to look at this? Would he be interested?
I don't know. I will message, see if he wants to come look. I know he's been participating from the lounge for a lot of these, and I do think we may get to keep him for longer.
Oh,
so
good. Yeah. I'm glad that worked out.
Me too.
It's interesting, that line goes down, and what's it connected to on the bottom?
Yeah, let's take a look.
It's right there, yeah.
Oh, there.
I think it's just a snag.
Hey, Tess, can you give me a zoom? Some stuff.
Can you pan down a tiny bit? Looks like there's an old one there with all the growth, and then that is very confusing.
Yeah.
Is that a stanchion?
Huh, maybe.
It actually looks like somebody put a weight on the bottom of the line, doesn't it? The line's going through, or at least one of the lines goes through there.
Yeah, almost looks like a...
Yeah. That might be metal.
Yeah, exactly.
Even more reason to stay away. Well, why is this floating up though?
Yeah, well, that's. I mean, it looks so taut. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. I mean, I don't understand why it'd be so high up in the water column if it was metal, but unless it was a massive float up there. But. Okay, Tess, you can clear it.
Okay, and you see that big hunk off to your left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're gonna call this as far forward as we can get. I don't really want to.
No, I'm gonna.
Ben, are you on SPL?
Sorry. Yeah,
oh, thanks.
Yeah, so we're going to call this as far forward as we can safely go on this. I just don't want to push it. We don't know. There's a lot of cable in the water column, and we don't know which direction it goes. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
so I'm going to just back out of there, and then, sorry for the viewers, it's going to be some blue water as we come up in the water column and away from the wreck. And then we're going to come down to the south, around to the bow, and then drop down in front of the bow. And we think that way we can at least be sure that there's no cable floating in front of the bow. So we'll see it. We'll see it in the cameras on our way down, and then we'll at least be able to get you the bow.
Okay, that's great.
All right. Okay, Jake, whenever you're ready.
All right. And I've got to make a quick call. to the Drix team. So,
No problem.
Noel?
I got it. Thanks, Larry. I've got questions for Frank, so.
I'm just going to keep my heading as such until we get to the bow.
Perfect. All right, let's come up to, like what? Let's come up at like 30 meters or so.
Okay, coming up.
Just in case. I'll follow you around.
Okay, so for everyone watching, we are currently diving on the USS Quincy wreck site here
Atlanta's
in
at
Iron
30.
Bottom Sound.
You want more?
And we have nearly circumnavigated the wreck site, but there are some hazards in the water column, so our pilots are pulling off of the wreck to move to a safer position, and then we'll reapproach hopefully the bow from a safe perspective to hopefully get some better imagery of the forward-most part of the ship. So we'll see some blue water for a bit as we transit around to the bow of this site. Frank, while we're moving around, could you maybe reintroduce the Quincy once again to people who may just be tuning in, and tell us a little bit about what makes this site special?
Okay.
I'm going to come up a bit more.
Quincy was
Sorry, I was floating.
No,
I'm in auto depth now.
part of the force that covered the initial landings on Guadalcanal on August 7th, 1942, an operation called Operation Watchtower. And the objective was to capture Henderson Field, or the airstrip that we called Henderson Field, to deny it to the Japanese in order to, the fear was that the Japanese would use such an airfield to hinder our lines of communication with Australia. So they mounted a quick operation. Quincy was part of the covering force, and she provided gunfire support to the landing forces. The Japanese response was swift. On the evening of August 8th night, a force of cruisers under the command of Admiral Mikawa came down a section of sea we would call the slot, entered the sound around Savo Island, which was being protected by two groups of cruisers. The southern group, closer to the landing areas, was being covered by USS Chicago and two cruisers of the Royal Australian Navy, HMAS Australia, the flagship, and HMAS Canberra. The northern group consisted of the cruisers Astoria, Vincennes, and Quincy. And Mikawa attacked the southern, well, back up a minute. Admiral Crutchley, the Australian admiral in command, on his flag was on HMAS Australia, had departed the line to confer with the theater commanders. And so his ship was out of the line and not present when Mikawa attacked. He succeeded in severely damaging both USS Chicago and HMAS Canberra. Chicago was able to leave the battle area. HMAS Canberra drifted throughout the night and would later be scuttled the next day. But after disabling that force, Mikawa turned towards the northern group and was able to close and attack Astoria, Vincennes, and Quincy. And the result was the loss of all three of them. And it was known as the Battle of Savo Island, and it is probably the single worst defeat in the U.S. Navy's history after Pearl Harbor. And excuse me. One of the things that happens in such a situation is the Navy learns from their mistakes, and so there was reading the after-action reports on these ships and how they were lost and things helped the Navy to improve their doctrine and combat tactics, and as well as how they collected and processed and disseminated information. But this was definitely one of the costliest battles in the Navy, and for the time it gave the Japanese command of the seas around the Guadalcanal. The American forces commanded the air during the daylight hours, and one of the questions that historians have often asked is why Mikawa didn't, after he had put the northern force out of action. There was really nothing to stop him from turning back south to take out the transports that were still offloading troops and supplies. But it's possible Mikawa believed that he was worried about his ships had become separated in the course of the attack, so it was going to take time to regroup. Their torpedoes, although very effective, were also quite large and cumbersome to handle. So it was going to take time again to reload those torpedoes. And as time went on, you're getting yourself closer and closer to a daylight scenario where again the field of battle would change. And also at this time, the Japanese Navy did not have any further heavy cruisers under construction. So a loss of one of his larger ships like that, there was no way to replace it. So things like that kind of weighed on his mind. So he chose to be cautious and withdrew from the battle area, even though he'd won a tremendous victory. It could have been far, far worse for the Allied Navy.
It's amazing to be here in the Solomon Islands and putting perspective and scale and
last night before I turned in, I sat out on the deck just kind of looking out at Savo Island and just wondering what it was like for those sailors many decades ago. Many of them were away from their homes for the first time, and and if you know, where the area around here is quite beautiful, stunningly. Beautiful. I mean, it's just incredible, the vistas and things. And yet, it for a few months, from late 1942 to early 43, it was one of the two most contested pieces of real estate on the planet.
Wow.
And if anyone's interested, I think the other one was the Battle of Stalingrad was also going on at this time. And both of those battles were epic. They were clashes of national will, and they both became decisive Allied victories in the end. And kind of that's where on those two axes is when the tide of the Second World War turned decisively in favor of the Allies. But the cost of those victories both of them was immense.
Yeah. Have you had any significant impressions from the first three dives that we've done so far, seeing these three ships at their final resting sites?
Seeing the ships and then rereading the accounts of their losses from the survivors and all that, it's just incredible trying to visualize what those young men experienced.
It's a squid.
And how it forever marked the rest of their lives. The other night, as you well remember, we were watching Bob Ballard's National Geographic
that's cool
documentary on his Guadalcanal
Tess, you want to give
exploration
us just a little,
in '93.
zoom? Just a little?
And he, of course, had the benefit of having some of the survivors from some of these ships, not just American, but Japanese as well. And we no longer have that that same situation because most of this have passed. But listening to their stories was, you know, and realizing that even though they were once bitter enemies, they were now together as friends was quite emotional.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Tess. We can zoom out.
And some of our viewers are asking if there's any other documentaries or books that you recommend that cover some of this history and some of these battles.
There's one by author named Hornfisher called Neptune's Inferno that is pretty amazing. And I believe the author Ian Toll has written one I have not read yet, but comes highly recommended.
Yeah, I don't see anything as of yet.
Okay.
Heading on Atalanta hasn't changed, so.
Good, looks like we're definitely free of anything, so that's good. It's a good start.
Yes, for those asking if we will be able to image the forward portion of Quincy, that is our plan. So we are currently, we've pulled off of the wreck and are attempting to transit and move the vehicles and the ship into a safer position so we could approach from the bow. So we're hoping to get a look at that, but our pilots are navigating this safely and making sure that there are no further hazards for us to be aware of. So hoping to lay eyes on the bow and get some good imagery and survey of the forward portion of the ship if we are safe to do so.
Noelle, what's your impression of what you've seen?
It's been amazing so far. I don't have a strong background in history, and so I've been really learning about these battles and very fortunate to have folks like yourself on board to be sharing some of these stories. But as you're reading these stories and about these accounts, and then to be here and to be witnessing these shipwrecks and to put spatial scale to some of the battles and the stories, and to be right off of Savo Island and understanding just how brutal some of these battles were and what it must have been like to be an 18, 19-year-old fighting in these wars and on this ship. It's really powerful and horrific, and we honor. It's an honor to be here and to be exploring these sites and sharing this with the world. And these are special places, and of course a very important part of our story and our history to learn about and to continue to share with the next generation and with everyone who's involved and participating with us.
Yeah, I think another thing that strikes me is just how confined these waters are.
Yeah.
And Dr. Ballard describes especially the naval battles that took place after this one, basically a barroom brawl where, organized tactics and things just seemed to fall apart, and it became kind of a free-for-all. And, just incredible.
Yeah, even just, you hear 7 miles across for Iron Bottom Sound, and then you're here, and even the first night, I think Megan and I were on deck, and it was like, you can see that. Like, that's not very far. How did you not see this? And it's so easy to say that now. Of course, it's dark. It's stressful. There's so many things happening. There's no moon. But yeah, I think it's really special to be able to be in this place and having this experience with everyone. Yeah. Have you read? There's been 2 recommendations, Frank, for Richard Frank's Guadalcanal as a book about this area.
Also,
have you read this?
I've read that's a good one.
Yep. Several people have recommended that.
I'm sure yours was much bigger than mine.
Were you just lateraling when you did that?
I've been doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out why it's reading that on the pressure.
Yeah, it might be a little bit of a memory.
Yeah, it's not even doing anything now. Just just refreshing or
Yeah, there's someone commenting on the troops that were on land that were hearing these battles as well. And, you know, we're obviously focusing on the maritime side to this campaign, but there's also a lot happening on land, right, Frank?
You are correct. It would have been kind of interesting if we'd been able to get a Marine Corps historian from the Marine Corps Museum to kind of participate, either online on this, to answer some of those questions. But yeah, it was a very desperate struggle at times. Both sides were struggling to reinforce their sides, and then the Japanese launched some attacks against the airstrip that fortunately Vandegrift and his men were able to hold off. Excuse me. Ultimately, Guadalcanal is notable because it became basically a battle of attrition, and once that happened, Japan just didn't have the resources to compete at that in a war like that. And by December they had decided to begin evacuating Guadalcanal, but it was still take some time for them to do that. Hiroshi, I think, can probably give you a little more perspective on the Japanese side of things on that, because I think he calls, the Japanese refer to Guadalcanal as like Starvation Island or something like that.
Wow.
You go around the island of Guadalcanal and you can still see the ruins of the battle pretty much anywhere you go. And they are still warnings about unexploded ordnance, around the island. And that should be quite sobering to anybody, wandering through the jungles and things around here. I don't know if you noticed the sign when you came into the airport warning you about that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's something about a warning to not have fires on the ground and things like that, yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to move a little bit ahead here. Okay. Just going to come to the east a little first. All right, Mike, let's start walking down slow.
All right, walking down slow. Follow you down.
You get the next 20 questions.
Starting to see the wreck in Atlanta.
We're done. We're
Sonar.
covering all this.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, let's do another 10 meters.
So just as an update, we are repositioning the ROVs and the ship to attempt to approach the USS Quincy wreck from a safer heading to avoid those cables and lines that were kind of strewn across the wreck site, hoping that we can get eyes on the forward part of the wreck in just a few moments.
Okay, I got the guns, it looks like. And the port off-road camera, very far out.
Okay. It still looks like we're fairly far away from
We are,
the bow.
Yeah,
So
we're
I don't know
good
what
ways
that
out.
would be off to.
Just barely see it here in the main camera. The guns are
Facing forward, yeah.
coming right into the cinema, the ROV lower camera.
There she is.
Yep, there's the guns. So we're over the bow area now.
Yep.
Yep.
But
Notice our guns are pointed higher like they were on Benson's.
That's, I don't know.
Cable.
I don't think it's our line. Because there's nothing here, see? This looks clear.
and we're on the port side.
We should be like right in the front, actually. I'm going to come down a little more.
So we're looking at turret 1. Is that? We're looking at turret 1.
It seems
So
like
I think
that.
turret 2 is the one that has the burst barrel, and those appear to be intact.
So we also have a missing bow on the Quincy, is that correct?
That's right.
Yep.
So all three of our
for 3.
New Orleans class destroyers.
Cruisers.
Cruisers, thank you, sorry. Lost their bows.
But I believe they have a sonar image of the bow for this one nearby.
No, I think you're good. I'm going to, yeah, I'm blown a little off to the north myself, so I'm going to walk myself back to the east. Rotate my heading some.
Hey Nav, when we approach the bow again, could we drop a pin on the, or the, I guess the forward-most turret? and that should be delta.
Okay. All right, gonna walk in now.
Roger that.
There's the anchor. Looks like, is that? Oh, maybe not. Oh, no, sorry. That's
the gun turret.
the gun turret again. It's completely dislodged from the vessel, huh?
I believe that's turret 1. Can we zoom in on the guns?
I'll drive over, yeah.
Nav, can we get a point on this? Thank you.
Her gun barrels appear to be intact, so I think that's turret 1.
It's a nice shot.
I get the impression that they're not all the same length. Is that the barrels? Is that possible?
No,
Sure
they're
looks
the
that way.
same. They're the same length.
Well, maybe the one just dropped in, huh?
Yeah.
Could it be on its recoil? The barrel?
Oh, yeah.
These guns were mounted in the same elevation sleeve, so they would.
I'm gonna line up the cinema camera for
Yeah.
you guys.
Excellent,
So
thank
as we
you.
pan to the right, I think we're going to see turret 2.
He's lining up the cinema camera for a minute. So
Yeah. Getting some video of turret 1. Looks really nice. Okay, capture image. Thanks, Ben.
You bet. Okay. Rotate out of here.
the question was what U.S. aircraft carriers were involved with the battle. I think in the Battle of Savo Island there were none.
There were none in Savo Island.
But later in the November battles, I think.
Well, in the Guadalcanal campaign, our surviving carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, Wasp, and Saratoga, all participated. Of course, we would lose Wasp to submarine torpedoes, and Hornet would be lost in the Battle of Santa Cruz Island in a carrier battle. Saratoga would be damaged, Enterprise would be damaged, but they would survive.
Okay, I can't really go too much further, guys.
That looks like the broken.
That's the
gun.
burst barrel there.
So that's, there's
turret 2.
Okay. Yeah, certainly get some good pics of that. I will.
I'll get at the cinema camera there, or the whatever.
Thank you.
Oh, come on down.
We're stretched out pretty well.
Okay,
haven't gone up tight yet, but.
So that's turret 2 then?
That's turret 2. That's the kind of the picture. Ballard's book has the bow line drawing of the ship on the bottom, and you can clearly see that the burst barrel like that. Sorry.
All right, guys. Sorry, that's about as much as I can give you.
That's okay, thank you.
It's okay. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, so the question is which way are the barrels pointing?
It looks like they're out to the northwest.
Yeah, they're trained to starboard.
Starboard, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Directionally.
Yeah. Ah, okay. There's a nice view.
Yeah, that's a good.
Look
That's
at
a
that
good
with the two turrets.
Yeah.
Clearly trained to starboard.
Okay. What would we like to do now?
Can you get bow on, or this is about as far as you want to go?
I can't get around. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, if that's we.
I can get down closer to the ground a little, but
Yep. Well, let's do that.
Yeah, can we do that?
Yeah.
Ahead,
Let's do that, please.
And I can stay to the south a little bit, but there's not too much further this way I can go.
Yeah, it's actually to the west. I'm hoping you can move a little.
I'll try a little. So we're, the reason is we see the previous struggle against the cable.
Yep. Yep.
And it was right kind of where we were.
Oh, okay.
The current, that's why we did this check. We came in this approach,
Sure.
this long approach, to verify that it wasn't there. But yeah, we're still in the danger zone, so.
Okay. I assume you don't want to do an immersive flight over the...
Usually I'm game for all kinds of challenges, but not
No. That was the answer I was hoping for. Ooh, I like that.
Cool
Yeah,
shot.
this is nice.
I'll try and load it up in the cinema cam too,
Yeah.
so you can double it up.
Little up so you can see the three.
Oh, I'm doing this camera really fast,
Okay.
and then I'll come up.
This is great, thank you.
No worries. Okay. Is that good enough?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
All right. Okay, Larry, I'll come up and
Sure.
anything you'd like to see particularly?
I'd like to look kind of down the barrels
See what I can do.
with that lighting. That's nice. Yeah, I think just like that.
Thanks.
All right, any other requests? If this is as far as we can go?
Is there any way you could kind of, when you were up by turret 2, is there any way you could kind of turn to see if we could see the bridge?
Yes. You sort of see it there? The windows?
No, all I see is that white stuff. Okay, now I can see the windows coming into view now. Yeah, I can see the windows now. Yeah, that's better, thank you.
Was it? Okay. Just for your...
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So unlike the sister, she still
Just so
retains
yeah,
her,
it still
her
has a
bridge.
bridge there.
Tess, if you'd like to zoom, you can go for it. Okay, that's good there.
Oh, let's see some of the damage. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, Tess, thanks. There's our line. Okay, coming down. All right, let's...
All right.
I'm going to back out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll just go straight south or whatever. Just get away from here, and then... Sure. Yeah, yep. Perfect. Yeah, we'll see where they want to go next.
Yeah, the next target is the Ayanami.
The Ayanami, okay.
It's about 6.3 kilometers from here.
Oh.
So it's away 3.5 hours or so.
Okay. Have they been doing butt-to-butt tows, or are we driving it?
I don't know.
I think
Noel, do you have an
what they
idea?
were saying earlier is that the ship only was doing half a knot on jet pump, but that should be something that the nav should confirm. They were doing butt-to-butt yesterday, going from the Vincennes.
Yeah. There could be things in our way, huh?
Yeah.
What's your guys' consensus? Would you like me to drive there, with bottom in view, and we watch sonar like a hawk? Back row, anybody?
Yeah, if we can get a sonar view, that would be fine. I'm not too concerned about the visual view. I think the sonar view is the thing that would be most useful, and we can identify targets.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, they were at a 50
Well, if that's the
meters.
case, then we can just do a tow, like a butt-to-butt tow.
They were keeping her get a 50 meters up altitude, and then just running with the norbit yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm definitely happy to do that.
Yep.
Take a little breather here.
If we see something that just looks so irresistible, we could, but we won't. We have to control ourselves. And it's basically a run southwest.
Southwest, okay. All right. Yeah, let's, I guess we'll come up to 50, or?
Altitude of 50 for Herc.
Okay.
And then, and they were keeping on auto altitude, and then the heading they just let it
Let
go.
it flop around?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we can come up whenever you're ready.
Okay, coming on up.
Okay. Great, okay. Perfect, that'll be nice. I could do with a breather.
Okay, great job, guys.
All right.
And to the folks out there, we'll be
And to the folks in Quincy, Massachusetts, hope you enjoyed the dive on your town's namesake.
And so we'll be steaming along, just towing the vehicle in the water column about 50 meters high. We'll have the high resolution multi-beam sonar on, so we'll see if there are targets out there or hazards. But we are heading towards the first of the Japanese vessels that we're going to look for. I should say that the position of this one is a little less certain than the positions that we've had for the other vessels.
Okay.
So once we get to the area, we might have to
Atalanta's at
do a
5-0.
little searching.
Do we
I'm
have
going to go ahead and make my heading
previous imagery of this, the Ayanami? Has that been, had dives on it before?
Oh, whoops.
Should know this.
Is that the right way? We got to go the other way, I think.
I think
to take out the wraps on the 6.8.
I think there was in the earlier ballot expedition.
Yeah,
they did
you're right.
survey it, but the positions back then are not as.
Thank you.
No worries. Absolutely, yeah. We'll just back out as far away. Yep. That's right.
Okay.
All right, I'm lining up.
Sorry.
So the question was whether a question came in was WASP the ship whose planes ended up as part of the Cactus Air Force.
I'm not sure of that.
All right.
Yeah, so a question about whether the cable's hazards come from the original wreck or something more modern. I think in this case it was something more modern. Some kind of lost fishing gear or something like that.
Although we didn't get as a comprehensive look at this one as we did with Vincent's and Astoria, it's still remarkable what we did get.
Yeah. I mean, that cable created quite a scare.
Yeah.
But we have to be cautious. Estimated time on Ayanami about 3.5 hours, we see. And Jonathan, one of the shore-based experts, says WASP, Hornet, and Enterprise's planes all ended up as part of the Cactus Air Force at one point or another.
Question came in about how long will it take to get to the Ayanami, and you said, what, 3.5 hours?
3.5 hours, yeah.
If all goes well.
If all goes well, yeah. Which we'll just assume it will.
Yeah.
We will.
I'll go find out.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be another 2 hours, 15 minutes before he comes in for watch, so
Oh, yeah.
I'll be most of the way there. All right, let me go see.
Is the plan still to do the sonar mapping and for the Japanese ships too?
Yeah, we'll run
yeah,
50 meters with the sonar going all the way.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so we're about to
Sorry? The norbit? Rennie can do it. Or K2. Do you want me to message Rennie? Rennie, if you're listening, we need you. I was talking about.
Hey, this is Megan in the lounge. Johan's headed down to the data lab to see if he can get Rennie for you.
Noel, there are a couple questions. Noel, there are a couple questions that are probably more up your line.
Front row, do you guys have a second to answer a couple questions, or you need some time? They're not too hard. Some viewers just want to know a little bit more about kind of the dual-bodied system that we operate. Why does Atalanta need to be above Hercules? What are some of the things you're thinking about with your positioning?
So a dual body system has a lot of advantages when you do this kind of work, mostly because Atalanta, for instance, will absorb the wave motion from the ship. So that's typically not translated as much down to Hercules. So it's a much, Hercules benefits by being a much more stable platform. The other advantage to that is that we get kind of an over-the-shoulder view of what Herc's working on. So that's why you get these really amazing shots of Hercules approaching the side of the ship, and that's really me as a Herc pilot. I use that to kind of see what's around. It kind of gives context to the area that's outside my regular field of view. So it's really helpful. But not every system is that way. Sometimes it's just a straight armored cable to the vehicle, and then they use floats to provide a catenary that gives you some working tether to kind of absorb that wave motion. How's that?
Excellent. Mike, anything to add about being Atalanta pilot? What's it like?
As far as Atalanta pilot, I mean, it's you try and help spot any obstacles for Hercules when he's really close in on these wrecks. You're looking for anything he might get snagged up on, but also you kind of have that higher third person kind of viewpoint. And then, when the seas are rough, it's a little bit harder to keep Hercules in the view because Atalanta does, as Ben was saying, absorb the shock of the sea state from the ship, since it's directly cabled to the ship. So, yeah, that's kind of the rule for Atalanta, and then seeing any obstacles coming up. So I'm just constantly checking gauges and making sure that not only Atalanta systems are running, but also keeping an eye on Herc systems as well. So. Okay, coming out of autohead. All right.
So we've got a question from the National Destroyer Memorial at Battleship Cove, wondering if we are looking for the destroyers to haven the first Laffey or Blue on this expedition.
Well, I believe Laffey is in line to be surveyed. I think we're doing Ayanami first, and then Yudachi, and then I think Laffey's the next one up.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm not sure the ones that have not been found. I think we'll have to wait and see. I guess next week to see what the dive plan is.
Absolutely.
If I understand correctly, Noelle, the DRIX team are doing mappings of the sound to look for the anomalies on the thing to investigate.
Exactly.
And, then we'll decide our course of action on how to dive on those and see if we can identify.
Yeah, so the first few targets that we've been diving on so far have been locations that we've had previous expeditions have located these wreck sites, and so we had a pretty good idea of where they were. So the first week we're kind of diving on some of these known targets and filling in imagery gaps, making sure we do non-invasive archaeological surveys of each of these important sites. And as Frank mentioned, and Larry is not in the room, but we can have him talk more about the DRIX program. This is an autonomous surface vehicle that is also here as part of this expedition, and they are surveying other portions of Iron Bottom Sound with a high-resolution multi-beam sonar system, looking for these new targets. So trying to locate these other wreck sites that have not yet been found, and will provide that information to us so that we can hopefully dive and validate some of these new targets and see what kind of wreck sites we might be able to locate during the course of our next few weeks here in the Solomon Islands. Frank, what can you tell me about the Ayanami? It'll be our first Imperial Japanese Navy ship. Really looking forward to that.
I'm not as much of an expert on the Japanese ship designs, but the Japanese destroyers were kind of smaller than their American counterparts, and but they were heavily armed, especially with their torpedoes. I believe Ayanami was one of the Fubuki class and one of the subclasses. You know, usually for destroyers they were often built in large numbers, and as improvements happen, they form subclasses. And I think Ayanami is actually one of the subclasses of a Fubuki. Hiroshi might know a little more about that. But the Japanese destroyer men were highly trained and highly capable sailors, and they proved their mettle in these early battles. Part of it was kind of how the Japanese viewed a potential war with America. They knew that they would never be able to match us for numbers, so their strategy was to draw American forces westward and would use their destroyers and cruisers to attack the American battle fleet to kind of whittle the numbers down, so that by the time that the U.S. reached the western waters, the battle fleets would be pretty much on an even field, and then they'd have this climactic gun battle to do it. And you know, that was one of the reasons why you saw cruisers and destroyers committed to these battles more than you know, the battleships came kind of late in the campaign, and both sides were reluctant to commit them initially because of the confined waters. But eventually they did, and it would lead to obviously the climatic action between the battleship Washington and the Japanese battleship Kirishima.
Are there any different, maybe really notable features on this class of vessel that we're going to be looking at that you're interested to keep an eye out for?
Not that I'm pretty much aware of, but you know, the Japanese designs are definitely distinctive from their American designs, especially if you look at the pictures of them online, you can see the bow in particular has a more kind of a rounded structure, whereas the American ones are kind of more straight and all. Don't know why that is. It's just, you know, again, the way the Japanese built their ships. If I remember correctly, Ballard did locate Ayanami on his 93 survey. So I believe he's got some pictures of it, and it looks like she's pretty fairly torn up. I believe she's broken in several pieces.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ayanami, I believe, she was also sunk during that kind of the climate when the battleships were committed to the action.
Yeah, the Science Ashore chat saying that she was sunk in the battleship duel.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone mentioned there haven't been able to find very many old photos of the wreck of the Ayanami online, and yep, that's part of what we're doing here, is hoping to collect some more imagery of each of these sites, do a comprehensive visual survey, so they're able to understand how these ships, a little bit more about what happened, their identity, tell this story, and see how they're changing over time.
One of the things the U.S. Navy was kind of blessed with was having some very competent combat photographers assigned to units and things, and so that's why you can generally find a lot more photographs of American ships in action and all this. The Japanese ones are not nearly as numerous. Some of them are just as dramatic. You know, like the photo of Quincy caught in the searchlights just before she was sunk. That's an amazing picture. You know, we historians and curators and archaeologists, we owe a lot of gratitude to those men and women who served as combat photographers, because you know, most of these stories that you see in books are told with pictures and all that. And all those pictures are in documentaries. I mean, those pictures were taken by somebody, and it's often not really, you know, given the credit that those were combat footages and films and pictures. The Navy recently got rid of their combat photographers, which is kind of unfortunate, but you know, hopefully we won't need them again. But we do owe them, those men and women, a very big debt of gratitude, because again, we're able to continue to tell these stories with the photos and things, and also art is often you know, another media that these stories are told in. The Navy actually had combat artists in World War II, and they still do. We actually still have 2 artists on staff.
Oh, wow.
Who we deploy to active units to capture scenes of day-to-day life in the sailor. But there were 2 notable ones in the Guadalcanal area, Dwight Shepler and McClellan Barkley. And if you look at Ballard's book, you'll see some of the artwork from Dwight Shepler. McClellan Barkley is notable because he lost his life here during the Guadalcanal campaign. He was one of the casualties. And we at the Naval History and Heritage Command do remember him and his sacrifice for his country. So.
Yeah, that's not part of the story that we often recognize or discuss in these spaces. Yeah, thank you so much for that reminder.
Yeah. Another interesting component of the campaign is after the campaign was over and the war had moved, to the west. Whenever destroyers or ships would sail through what was called the slot and enter Iron Bottom Sound, they would perform an S-shaped maneuver as a salute to their fallen, to those who had given their lives during the battles around Savo Island. There's some pretty dramatic pictures of that being done, and it's kind of a nice gesture.
Absolutely. Is that something we hope the Nautilus can
I would love to
perform?
see Nautilus do that. I won't lie to you. I think it would be a fitting tribute to all of the sailors and
Absolutely.
Marines and airmen who gave their lives.
Absolutely.
In this campaign. Yeah, I see our shore-based experts are beginning to post stuff about Ayanami. And yeah, she's broken in two. The forward part's kind of upside down. One thing to kind of look out for on Japanese warships of World War II is at the bow, they mounted a chrysanthemum emblem to signify, the Japanese warships were considered property of the emperor, and the sign, the chrysanthemum, was a tradition on their ships. They would also carry a portrait of Hirohito, and when a ship was, about to be abandoned, you would often read accounts where they were transferring the portrait off of the ship because they didn't want the portrait to go down with the vessel. A couple years back when I think Ocean Exploration dove on the wrecks at Midway, and we got our first real look at the Japanese carrier Akagi, which was the flagship of the Pearl Harbor attack force, and then the flagship of the Kido Butai throughout the early months of the Pacific War, and then lost at Midway. We were very surprised when we came across, when we rounded the bow of Akagi, and her chrysanthemum was still there.
Wow.
And we had some Japanese experts online, and when they saw that, you could tell they were tearing up, because again, that was a symbol of their nation. So when the cameras go down on Ayanami, it will be kind of interesting to see if we can see the chrysanthemum on her bow.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Frank. For anyone watching at home, if you'd like to see that footage from Ocean Exploration Trust and NOAA Ocean Exploration's exploration of the aircraft carriers of the Battle of Midway, you can search that on Nautilus Live.
Oh, wow. I'm seeing this image that one of our scientists ashore has shared in the chat of the the bow being completely upside down of the Ayanami while the stern is upright. How do you think that happens?
I don't know. I mean,
It's a mystery.
it's you know, I think it's a case of understanding physics and the design of the ship and damage.
How it went down.
Yeah.
What was what ended up causing the Ayanami to sink? What was happening?
She was caught up in I think she, if I remember correctly, and I'll have to review this, I think she was lost early in the battle. But again, she got hit, and a destroyer is a much smaller vessel than a cruiser or battleship, so they don't absorb as much damage and survive. And so when they're hit hard, and they go down fast.
How much smaller are these destroyers than the cruisers that we've been imaging?
Hang on, and I'll tell you.
Oh wow! Look at the Squidward.
So the cruisers that we were looking at were nominally about 10,000 tons, but they were fully loaded. They would be closer to about 12. Ayanami was about 2,000 tons, so much, much smaller.
Much smaller.
They were about 112 meters long, or about 115 at the waterline, and 118.4 meters overall in length. Beam was about 10.4 meters. They were powered by 4 Campon type boilers and 2 geared turbines, and capable of very high speed, well over 35 knots. They carried 9 torpedo tubes, 36 depth charges, and
Frank, can you speak a little bit to how these ships would work together? Because they're clearly very different sizes and really different capabilities. Can you speak to kind of a cruiser versus a destroyer and that landscape?
Well, you know, the capital ships of the Navy were, of course, the battleships, and then at the beginning of World War II, that was beginning to transition to aircraft carriers. Cruisers were seen as initially as kind of the scouting force of the Navy, and later as they would also form escorts to protect the battleships and then carriers. Destroyers were again, a smaller vessel that was faster, more maneuverable, and could, you know, take, you know, their primary goal was anti-submarine warfare or attacking other, you know, the screens of other, you know, attacking fleets. As the war progressed, battleships, of course, lost their primary position, and, you know, as the final arbiter. They were put to use as shore bombardment platforms, especially the older battleships, which were slower in speed and couldn't keep up with the carriers. The 10 modern battleships that we built, of the 2 North Carolinas, the 4 South Dakota, and the 4 Iowa class that were completed, they were fast enough to be able to keep up with the carriers, and so they actually were worth their weight in gold to be anti-aircraft platforms with their batteries. and their secondary armament in particular. In fact, the battleship South Dakota is often credited for saving the carrier Enterprise during the Battle of Santa Cruz. Enterprise and Hornet were engaging Japanese carriers. The Enterprise had a battleship in the South Dakota as part of her escort. The Hornet did not. South Dakota is often credited with shooting down 26 aircraft that were attempting to attack Enterprise. And although Enterprise was damaged, she was not sunk, whereas Hornet did not have the firepower of a modern battleship to provide that level of protection. And she was hit harder and eventually lost. And some of the Navy credits the survival of Enterprise to the fact that South Dakota was there to protect her. But cruisers and destroyers, as the war progressed, became more escorts to the carriers. And destroyers in particular were used against submarines as well as anti-aircraft. Most of the armament on a destroyer is dual purpose, meaning they could be used in a surface action or could be, fired vertically for anti-aircraft protection as well. Cruisers also tended to serve as flagships for screening force, or in some the fleet flags were actually cruisers at one point as well. Indianapolis, which was later one of the last ships lost in World War II, had been built as a fleet flagship, but was not being used as that at the time of her loss. Another interesting thing about the three cruisers we saw is that we're seeing pretty much technology that was still in play in the early part of the war that would later be superseded by more modern systems. The 1.1, you've all heard me kind of talk about that a little bit, about they were proven to be not very effective, prone to jam, and if you look at later pictures of the surviving ship, you'll see that they were soon replaced with more modern, capable systems. And that was a big thing for the Navy to do, and it often added considerable weight to already ships that were tightly designed. And so the goal is to not have a ship that's top heavy or overweight, but at the end, towards, as the war progressed, Navy was willing to accept overweight as long as it bought a more capable anti-aircraft battery. The risk there, of course, was in a damaged situation. It could backfire on you, and that's kind of what happened with Indianapolis. She got hit, and she was already overweight, and the damage was catastrophic anyway. I doubt, she probably would not have survived, but it certainly did not help that her stability was compromised by being overweight anyway. And after the war ended, the process kind of reversed, and you saw drastic weight reductions.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just the systems and things; it was also the manpower required to operate them.
Right.
In today's Navy, they try to find ways to reduce the number of crew on a ship. But back then, some of these ships, despite their sizes, had over 800 men. So.
Wow. Yeah, someone from the National Destroyer Memorial at Battleship Cove is commenting that some of the lessons that we learned from, these battles here, that only about 6 months later, the 2,100-ton Fletcher-class destroyer started showing up in the South Pacific. And that learning from these lessons, the American night fighting with these larger destroyers, they're saying led by the famous 31-knot Arleigh Burke took control of this area from the Japanese, and that being a major turning point.
It was. By the end of the Guadalcanal campaign, the situation as far as material was concerned, had changed drastically. Whereas these, Midway and Coral Sea and Guadalcanal were largely fought by what I call the treaty navy, ships that were built under the time of the Washington and London treaties. But when war broke out, there was a big push to make up for the numbers that we weren't able to build in the 30s, and you had the Two Ocean Navy Act, and to build up the Navy, it was going to require a large number of ships, large number of men, and things to man them, plus training. And it took time to do that. And what had changed by the end of Guadalcanal was you began to see the first of those units coming online. So the first of the new carriers, the Essex, commissioned, I think, on December 31st, 1942. And as some of the old timers at the command told me in one of my early days, no other hull was more anxiously awaited than the Essex, because it was going to, again, be the beginning of a new fleet of aircraft carriers, which had the more powerful Iowa-class, nearing completion. You had the Cleveland-class cruisers and the Baltimore-class cruisers. You had the Independence-class light carriers. You had all these ships that were suddenly becoming into commission and being worked up and everything, and they're the ones who kind of helped capitalize on this victory at Guadalcanal. The Japanese found themselves in a position where they couldn't replace the losses. We not only replaced the losses, we expanded beyond that. And it wasn't just a quantitative. I mean, the training that went back into training the new pilots to fly the planes and man the ships was a huge thing. And that was something that was very different in our outlook on war versus the Japanese. We rotated our combat pilots back so that they could make sure that their training and experience got passed on to new pilots coming in, whereas the Japanese rarely did that. And so in a war of attrition, eventually the odds catch up with you. And so some of their greater pilots that could have passed on knowledge and experience didn't. And so that led to a qualitative advantage and decisively into America's favor. If you look at the drawing that the guy sent us of the Ayanami, notice how the bow kind of curves at the bottom.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Frank, as you talk about the Treaty Navy, could you tell us a little bit more about that time before kind of that interwar period, and what were those kinds of restrictions on these ships?
Well, after World War I, the three major navies, Britain, United States, and Japan, had begun what could have been seen as another ruinous naval arms race. Such a race had been one of the causes between, the war between Germany and Britain. And so at the end of World War I, of course, the British began to see that, okay, well, the Americans are beginning to lay down new classes of battleships and battle cruisers armed with 16-inch guns. They're going to outclass anything they were able to build during the war. So, and the Japanese also had similar plans. And Britain had already been, financially drained through because of World War I. Could ill afford to begin another, arms race like that. But they too began a design of a new class of battleships and battle cruisers that were far larger, going to be more expensive, more powerful. And the U.S. had a advantage in that they were able to kind of read the codes and kind of understood what the situation was politically and militarily amongst the Allied nations. And so President Harding called for a conference to discuss a way to, limit armaments. And so in February 1922, they signed the Washington Naval Treaty, which each of the three countries agreed, and the signatories, France and Italy, were also part of it, agreed to abandon their capital ship construction programs. They would also limit the size of their cruisers to 10,000 tons. There were some other provisions in it as compensation, or I should say, the Americans and Brits were kind of given parity, whereas the Japanese were not. It became the famous 5-5-3 ratio, so that the Japanese fleet would be limited to a percentage of the size of the British and American navies. As compensation, the British and the Americans agreed not to fortify certain parts of their Pacific holdings. One interesting clause of the Washington Naval Treaty, though, allowed each of the signatories to take 2 of the battleship or battlecruiser hulls that had been under construction that were going to be condemned. They were allowed to convert those to aircraft carriers. And the Japanese and the American navies took that option up. For the U.S., it became Lexington and Saratoga. Originally, the Japanese ones were going to be Amagi and Akagi, but in 1923, an earthquake hit Japan, and it damaged the hull of Amagi on the stocks, and so it was beyond economic repair. So the Japanese substituted the battleship Kaga hull, and so that became their 2. The Brits decided not to pursue converting their G3 design, and they instead chose to convert Glorious and Courageous, which were 2 much smaller vessels, to carriers. So in a way, that's where we and the Japanese began to learn our carrier doctrines that would come to play in World War II. So the Washington Treaty lasted until 1930. Then it was agreed that they'd hold another conference in London and signed another treaty to extend the holiday of battleship construction. So they would not permit construction of new battleships for another 5-year period. So that led to massive rounds of reconstruction of existing older capital ships among the 3 navies. Japan in particular exercised that option quite effectively with their design. So like their Congo class battle cruisers were rebuilt as fast battleships. But by that point too, in the 30s, the Depression had hit, and so there was less enthusiasm about building large fleets and things, and so a lot of it was more of I guess the way I would describe it, the programs for each of the navies was kind of anemic. They weren't getting the funding to build what they wanted. They had to take what they could get. And that led to a further rundown of the shipbuilding and armaments industries. And then as the treaty system began to fall apart in the mid-30s, there was a sudden rush to rearm. Nazi Germany was beginning to remilitarize, and that sparked, the French and the Italian. I mean, it all began to collapse. And then the Japanese decided in 1936 that unless they were given parity with the British and American, they were not interested, and they gave their notice that they were withdrawing. And so that kind of sparked the, rearmament very fastly, and the Brits had a hard time, in particular, to reconstitute their industries to build warships, because some of their shipyards were no longer in business. Some of their armaments factories had been disbanded, and crucially, the design teams had been broken up. And so you have trying to reconstitute that knowledge base apply that to new technology, and it was very hard for them. And so suddenly the government was willing to spend money to build a lot of ships, but they didn't have the capability to absorb all the requirements. Same thing with the U.S. as well. It was going to take time to mobilize, rebuild some of the infrastructure we needed. And, of course, the Japanese, after they pulled out of the treaty, began, their work on the Yamato and Musashi. So it just kind of all, when the treaty system worked, it was a good thing. But then when it fell apart, it really fell apart, and it had near disastrous consequences, especially for the British, trying to reconstitute those lost workforces and all. And the Brits were always kind of hampered during the war with trying to, be keeping up with the industrial capacity and the needs of their troops and armed forces. And the U.S., of course, became the arsenal of democracy, and so strayed a little bit, but that's kind of the gist of it all.
Oh, that was amazing. Thank you.
Grossly oversimplified, but but our battleships, South Dakota and Washington, that participated in these battles, they were products of the Washington and London treaties as well.
There's a lot of excitement for finding the Laffy and getting some imagery of that from our viewers here.
Yeah, Laffy's one of those kind of unsung heroes of the battle. She went kind of toe to toe against the Japanese battleship EI, and then shortly after that encounter, she was pounced on by Japanese destroyers and sunk. Very famous action, very courageous. The Navy also honored her with a new ship that went on to distinguish herself in World War II, and she was heavily damaged by kamikaze hits in the closing months of the war. And she is now preserved as a museum ship in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
I hope one day that, I wonder if my boss is listening, but he knows this anyway, that Laffy is one of those names I'd like to see resurrected on an Arleigh Burke destroyer, in memory of the sacrifice of the one here at Guadalcanal, and then the memory of what happened to her namesake in the closing months.
It doesn't look like he's on,
No.
so we'll have to repeat that for him next time.
Oh, he knows.
Let him know.
I see some of our online experts are looking at the Japanese battleships, EI and Kurishima now. Those were interesting ships. The lead ship Congo, in those days Japan was still, building up their home shipbuilding industry, and so they would have tended to order warships from foreign, mainly British yards. And Congo was designed kind of as a, along the lines of their Lion-class battle cruisers, but they were far more modified a little bit, to the point where even the British were more impressed with what they were seeing. And they actually delayed construction of one of the ships in the class to incorporate some of what they saw. And Congo was, like I said, originally designed. They were originally designed as battle cruisers. Congo was the last ship, capital ship built in the British yard for the Japanese. After that, they are all built in Japanese yards. And they were effective designs, and they, again, because of the Washington and London treaties, their life was long. They were modernized during the 20s and 30s. EI was originally demilitarized as a training ship along the lines of U.S. Navy. Their equivalent would have been the Utah and later Wyoming battleships, and the British also, I think it was Thunderer and Iron Duke, and it meant removing some of their gun mounts and some of the armor and some of their propulsion plants and everything. But in the 30s, as the Japanese began to move away from the treaty system, EI was taken in hand as well and totally reconstructed along the lines of her sisters. And some of her superstructure in particular was rebuilt as a prototype for the to test the design theories that they were incorporating into the Yamato.
Frank, can you talk a little about how long it would have taken to build one of these ships? And also, how does that fold in with the naming process? You mentioned you'd love to see Laffy again. Like, when and how does the ship get its name?
That's well too complicated, and that's kind of a, I don't know, that's probably not a topic I should really go into. I could get into some trouble. For building these ships, it kind of depended on the size and the ship, and of course the time they were built. Some of these cruisers were built in all three nations, U.S., Britain, and Japan, as a way to keep shipyards employed and keep the skilled workers necessary. So they accepted a rather what we'll call a leisurely rate of construction. But when war became, on the horizon, they began. It was really amazing how the shipyards were able to work faster and deliver quality products much faster than expected. I'm trying to remember when the Essex was laid down. They were expecting it to be, I think, 3 or 4 years before she'd finish, but they finished her well ahead of that schedule. Same thing with the Iowa class battleships. Where the bottlenecks came were just, again, industry providing needed pieces and parts in an environment where there were competing demands, but they eventually worked it out. But it got to the point where we could build destroyers very fast, usually within well under 2 years. In some cases, they were being laid down at the start of a year and being commissioned, not necessarily ready for action or whatever, but at least being launched and fitted out before the year was out.
Wow.
Cruisers and battleships and carriers, of course, are far more complicated and would take longer. For the battleships, the controlling factor was the construction of the gun mounts, because they require a lot of heavy industry, and you can knock a hull together pretty fast, but the intricate and strength required in the gun tubes and things required a much longer process. So have you seen any sea life that's interesting? I know when we dove on Midway a few months ago, we found I think a type of jellyfish that had never been identified before. So I'm just curious if you've seen anything on these dives that's new to you?
Yeah, I haven't noticed anything new that I would describe as new so far. Been paying a lot of attention to the wreck details, so haven't been doing a proper biological survey, but yeah, it was interesting to see on the Astoria yesterday the amount of life relative to the Vincents and the Quincy today even, which I think was really amazing to think about the habitat that these wrecks form. And we talked about this a little bit on our last watch, and the role that structure plays in marine environments. That's very much an interest that I have in my ecological background. And yeah, I think it was really cool to see those big crabs that would also position themselves up on several of the gun mounts on many of the wrecks that we've seen. I think we got some fun images of them, sticking up in the water column and trying to capture some food.
I like to see anemones myself.
The anemones are really cool.
Do you know what kind of squid that was we saw earlier?
I do not. Did you know? You're our squid documentation expert.
It definitely wasn't a colossal squid, that's for sure. No, it kind of had a body like the coloring was sort of like a gonatus or a gonatus, but it had those really long arms and really small flappers. I'm not sure what those are called. But
no, maybe we'll have a squid expert chime in. You guys got some really nice footage of it. On that note, Ben, I think you now have to tell your squid story.
Nice segue there. Do tell.
So we, this was a couple months ago, we were, this is on another ship, the Falcor 2, and we were off the South Sandwich Islands in the, just above Antarctica. And there was a really interesting seamount. It was really, I've never really flown on anything like it. It was really just huge cliffs that just kind of shot straight up. I mean, they were like hundreds of meters tall, and then they just like drop off on both sides. It's just like, it was crazy. I've never seen, it looked kind of like the Dolomites, if you've ever seen that mountain range, like the very tippy top of that. And there were, it was a volcanic area too, so there were also the basalts, the columnar basalts. So you had all these big columns of like hexagonal stones, just huge. Anyways, beautiful. And we happened to be getting chased by a swarm of krill. And then the other problem we had was an iceberg. It was a giant iceberg that was like right next to the boat.